Hello classmates, my name is George Coleman, and this is presentation 3. Today we shall go through the standard of 1926.21. That is safety training and education. I chose this topic because safety training and education could be beneficial to all employees in the prevention of injuries. Throughout this presentation, I will be making comparisons to my experience with Neighbors Alaska Drilling. For those of you who are unaware of what Neighbors Alaska Drilling does, it is a drilling company based all over the world, but in Alaska, primarily on the North Slope. (1926.21a) states, general requirements, the Secretary shall, pursuant to Section 107F of the Act, establish and supervise programs for the education and training of employees and employers in the recognition, avoidance, and prevention of unsafe conditions in employment covered by the Act. Employer responsibility is 1926B. 1926B1. The employer should avail himself of safety and health training programs that the Secretary provides. It is truly in the employer's benefit to provide a thorough and continually evolving safety training course for the employees. An injury could be far more expensive than preparing your people to get on board with safety and the safety culture that is sweeping across the United States. 1926B2. The employer shall instruct each employee in the recognition and avoidance of unsafe conditions and the regulations applicable to his work environment to control or eliminate any hazards or other exposure to illness or injury. Prior to setting foot on the North Slope, new employees have to go through a 3-day training course, which is called Rig Pass. In Rig Pass, we learn all about the various types of injuries that you're more likely to confront when you're up there working on the field. Every year after that, you have to come in for a refresher course that lasts about 1 day, 8 hours. (1926B3) states, employees required to handle or use poisons, caustics, and other harmful substances shall be instructed regarding the safe handling and use and be made aware of the potential hazards, personal hygiene, and personal protective measures required. PPE. I worked in the pits for a couple years, and I had to handle a lot of mud products. And a lot of these were dangerous chemicals that if it touched your skin or eye, it could do some really bad stuff. So what they came up with, I'm sure a while ago, is the MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet. And in that MSDS, it has all the chemicals and products you'll be using for that location. You know, it could vary. But in that MSDS, it tells you the toxicity and what kind of PPE you're required to wear while handling that product. I found that very useful. 1926B4. In job site areas where harmful plants or animals are present, employees who may be exposed shall be instructed regarding potential hazards and how to avoid injury, and the first aid procedures to be used in the event of an injury. Despite what you might imagine as a tundra wasteland, it's actually teeming with wildlife. We go through many different training exercises and classes regarding how to confront and be safe around an animal. Despite what you may think of the North Slope, it is not a wasteland where there is no life. It is actually teeming with many different and diverse different animals. Next section, 1926B5, states, employees required to handle or use flammable liquids, gases, or toxic materials shall be instructed in the safe handling and use of these materials and made aware of the specific requirements contained in subparts D, F, and other applicable subparts of this part. Again, the MSD sheets came in very handy when working with these dangerous chemicals or liquids. The one thing that I got out of it was PP is by far your best defense against exposure to any one of these substances. 1926B 6.1. All employees required to enter into confined or enclosed spaces shall be instructed as to the nature of the hazards involved, the necessary precautions to be taken, and in the use of protective and emergency equipment required. The employer shall comply with any specific regulations that apply to work in dangerous or potentially dangerous areas. Neighbors has a confined space permit. Prior to each entry in a confined space, in our case it was the pits most often than not, you'd have to fill out this permit step by step and go over a hackle. And in the permit, prior to even entering, you had to run gas monitoring tests. And the gas monitors would continuously go on while the work was being performed. 1926B 6.2. For purposes of paragraph B6.1 of this section, confined or enclosed space means any spaces having a limited means of egress which is subject to the accumulation of toxic or flammable contaminants or enclosed or has an oxygen deficient atmosphere. Confined or enclosed spaces include but are not limited to storage tanks, process vessels, bins, boilers, utility vaults, tunnels, pipelines, and open-top spaces more than 4 feet in depth, such as pits, tubs, vaults, and vessels. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.